everyone. My name is Alma Tillman. Welcome to our third episode of Conversation Starters. It's a conversation series that we started a few months ago, and in honor of Latinx Heritage Month, we are super duper excited to welcome three very inspiring Latinx Latina leaders to today's panel titled Latinx Leads. So, starting with one of our favorite Latina faces in film, I'd like to welcome each of you separately, and then we can go and you guys can do a little bit of an intro. So, again, starting with one of our favorite Latina faces in film, please welcome actress and producer Chelsea Rendon. Welcome, Chelsea. Welcome.
Hello.
Woo. And right next to Chelsea, we have national immigrant rights activist, digital creator, and organizer, Miss Sara Mora. Welcome, Sara. Glad to have
Hi,
you.
everyone. Woo.
And last but not least, we have youth development coordinator at nonprofit organization, the Youth Justice Coalition, Gloria Gonzalez.
Woo.
So,
Hi, everyone.
hi, Gloria. So before we begin with some of our questions, why don't we just kind of go around, starting with you, Sara, and we can move down to Gloria and Chelsea, and just tell us a little bit about yourselves and a little bit about the current work that you're doing.
Yeah, so my name is Sara, and I was born in Costa Rica. I grew up in New Jersey, and my upbringing was, I feel like, such a simple, stereotypical immigrant like lifestyle. But during high school was when I started to realize that so much of what my friends and my own life would be like after college, after high school, would be blurry. Like, we really had no idea how to get into college, having parents, being first generation college students, but also so many of us being undocumented in a coast that was really low key about legal status, made me want to take action. So eighth grade, I began to be part of committees that would take us on trips and encourage us to really think about life after high school. And being part of these committees and being a volunteer at local community orgs, the biggest thing I noticed is, again, it just wasn't a thing to talk about legal status in the East Coast. And at 17, I interviewed the president of Costa Rica after graduating, and I began to talk about diplomacy efforts around elected officials that at a presidential level in countries, supporting perhaps the scholarships for undocumented students in the US. And I founded something called Population Mic, which is now an org that I'm using to help make digital media accessible to local immigrant rights-based orgs across the country, because that's how history and data is controlled. If we don't understand digital, then it's easier for that to not be in the hands of the community. That's a little about me.
Gloria? Gloria, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Just tell us
Okay.
a little bit about yourself and maybe some of the work that you do at the Youth Justice Coalition.
Yeah, so I actually started organizing or getting involved in this realm of things when I was 15. This year, it's been 10 years now.
Wow.
And I think that the reason why I come into this work is really just, I grew up in South Central and seeing the level of incarceration and poverty, and looking at the effects of the long-term effects really of the war on drugs and the prison industrial complex and the school to jail track, and seeing like a lot of my people on probation, um, and myself being pushed out of school too. I think that all those things led me, or like that's how I kind of stumbled upon this work and have been doing it ever since. And so I think maybe if I can share about my work really consists of challenging like the reform systems and trying to really push for transformation of systems or for closing of systems. And we've been able to close juvenile halls and camps and pass many bills that have been able to get people free. And even now, when we think about use of force, right? Being able to challenge these systems, and I think overall my work exists in many different realms of the social justice world.
Wow. Thank you for that. That's definitely great work, and I just want to say thank you for doing that work. We definitely need more people like you in our community. Chelsea?
I am an actress. I grew up in Montebello, East LA, started acting at 6 years old, and my mom was a superhero. We grew up, it was a single parent household, my mom and me and my sister, and she just taught me to fight for whatever it is that I needed or wanted to, or whatever my passion was. And, it wasn't until I got older that I realized the lack of representation when it comes to Hollywood and Latinos specifically. And now that I'm older and I actually have like some form of platform and I have like thousands of followers, I really try to use that for the betterment of everyone. And I talk about things that are important to me. I grew up with a very diverse group of friends. So my mom taught me never to see color. It was always like friends. And I remember the first instance that I had was like, oh, wow, what just happened? I was like 9, 10 years old, walking down the street with a friend of mine who was a director that I worked with and his 2 sons, and they're Black. And somebody literally walked in the street to avoid us. And I was like, wait, what just happened? Like, but even then, like, I was young and I didn't realize it. So I'm like, we need to talk about these things. And, it's been very much like, oh, actors don't get political or don't say this and don't say that. Just, you get paid to play a part. But now with social media, we all have a voice and we all have a platform, and we have to use that for good. So especially since I booked Vida, where I play an activist, I've definitely tapped into that and realized that I had been an activist kind of my whole life without realizing it, because I was always fighting for somebody else or what I felt was right. And I did more like research within gentrification. And then again, also just in my world, it's all about equality and it's love, no matter what color your skin is or, what your background is. And so I've been very vocal about that on social media, especially this year with the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all these. Again, the sad thing is the list just keeps going on, and we have to talk about it. And, for me specifically, my biggest conversation that I like to talk about is the Black and brown divide, because that for me is something that I grew up hearing about, even though I was like, no, I like love whoever I love, and that doesn't matter. But growing up in East LA, growing up with my cousin, that was in and out of the prison system, it was very much like them versus us. And I think especially now we need to unite more than ever. Not only Black and brown, all minorities need to unite, but that's what I've been really trying to use my platform for, is just representation on screen, supporting talent, and also just bringing up and starting conversations that need to be started.
Thank you, Chelsea. And that's the reason why we have you on this panel, because I believe that you have been one of the people that has definitely been using their platform for, to speak out on all of these, social justice issues. And just a little bit of a background about how we came up with today's conversation that will lead into the first question is that I believe it was about a day or two after a young man, 18-year-old by the name of Andres Guardado, had been shot and killed here in Gardena. I was like literally scrolling down through my IG posts, and I think it might have even been a post that was posted with a picture of Andres from the Youth Justice Coalition, where there was a conversation that was started, and folks were saying, well, where are our leaders? How come there are no Latino leaders? Why isn't anybody in Hollywood talking about? It seems like, we don't have any leaders. And I chimed in, and I completely agreed with them. And then a few seconds later, Ms. Sara Mora, who I'm glad, we have on this panel, jumped in and said something to the effect of, there are a lot of leaders out here. You just need to do the work and you need to educate yourself. Like, this has been work that has been done and has been, it isn't just something that like all of a sudden became trendy. People have been doing this work all along. So I really just had to like stop myself and literally check myself and realize that, that I needed to do the work, and that I needed to do the research on who was doing the work, and I had to have a conversation with myself and ask myself, why do I feel like I need to have a celebrity person or somebody with a larger than life platform tell me about an issue? And I started asking some of my friends, and I got the same response. People, they had the same question. They kept asking, saying, "You're right. There are no Latino leaders." And, you know, we don't have, like, where's our Al Sharpton or where's our Patrice Cullors? Like, who are these people? But I did, you know, I went back with them to let them know, you know, I started doing a little bit more research on Sara as well as organizations like Youth Justice Coalition Los Angeles to realize that, hey, there's people that have been doing this work. And maybe just because, you know, they're not on a television show doesn't mean that we don't have leaders. So that is the reason why I have all three of you guys here today, because I want to make sure that folks know that there are people out here doing the work. And sometimes something else that I realized was that just because you have like a famous person out here on this platform, sometimes I think that might even that might do more harm than good, because if it's somebody who is not educated on the issue, they could just be spreading misinformation. They could just be doing it because their PR person told them to do. So, you know, with that, Chelsea, I'm going to, you know, ask you this question because I know, you know, you're a Latina in Hollywood. Why do you think that a lot of people, you know, myself included, or at least now I'm a little bit more educated, I'm trying to do the work. Why do you think people have this need to feel like, oh, if we don't have this big famous voice when it comes to speaking about social issues, if like J-Lo's not talking about it, or, you know, I don't know who else, there's nobody, people think that there's nobody doing the work. I mean, do you think that famous voices in entertainment matter, or do they not matter? What's your take on it? And we can go around for the three of us, but I'd like to start with Chelsea.
Well, I think that, of course, we would want famous people to say something because it shows that they care. And, you know, we're supporting them by watching their project or, you know, buying their music. So, yes, we're fans of them. But now social media has humanized a lot of people. So you see them in their day-to-day life, not only in the glamorous side of their career. And I think that's where people in general, because even though, like, yes, I'm an actor, but I'm not J-Lo. I'm over here. J-Lo's over there, you know? And so even for me, like, there was a big conversation when there was that the situation that happened in Puerto Rico where like a lot of celebrities showed up, Ricky Martin and Bad Bunny and all these people. And one of the biggest questions was, where is J-Lo? Where is Mark Anthony? You know, because they are like the biggest names that came out of Puerto Rico. And so, again, we can't demand them to say something because maybe they don't feel the need to, or they don't agree or whatever. And everybody has a right to their own opinion. But at the end of the day, I think that a lot of famous Latinos, Latinx people are honestly just scared because they don't have the opportunities that white actors do, that black actors do. You know, we're the most underrepresented, like us and Asians are the most underrepresented when it comes to Hollywood. So I think that it stems from fear of like, if I say something, am I going to get taken off the list for auditions for next projects and stuff? And also maybe they don't agree. Like there's Latinos that are for Trump and maybe they don't want to voice that they're for Trump because they know how much backlash they're going to get. But it is heartbreaking because I feel the same pain. You know what I mean? I connect more with like average people than I do with quote unquote celebrities. And it's that thing of like, I wish people would be talking, you know, and, you know, kind of like Eva Longoria and America Ferrera that have She Se Puede. I think that's a really great organization that at least is trying to do something. And again, you have people that are the true heroes, the true fighters that have been fighting the good fight and they're not recognized, you know, like who do we have? Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez that are like Dr. King, but there's so many other people, you know, like Sara, you know what I mean? Like Gloria that are doing stuff, but then just don't get the praise that they should.
Got it. Sara, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I actually want to talk about my friends and me. I've just been thinking about the ways in which things are going to keep shifting even more aggressively. And for the Latino population, people with big platforms will be the platforms that amplify the community, period. And just thinking about the fact that people with platforms should really be just serving as redirectors of traction, right? I also want to talk about the fact that Latino identity is also something that has never really been so clear and defined that everyone could relate to it, right? I think even just in the East Coast, being Costa Rican and being Central American where migration is people think of particular countries when they think of immigrants, right? So I think there's so much context and complexities behind why it's not that simple for us to have an MLK and an Al Sharpton. It's the fact that we've been pushed onto identities like being Hispanic by white people who actually created that concept in the during the civil rights movement. And I don't know. I feel like I take things really personally, which is why I'm working on projects to help redirect traction. And I actually do remember the Youth Justice Coalition now that you guys said LA, because they're one of the orgs that I feel like are doing the work, but would never have the luxury of spending that much money and time telling people they're doing the work. And so because so much of Spanish-speaking country, people from Spanish-speaking countries' history is either pushed to the side or is put second to like history that has happened more currently here, of perhaps the black community. It makes it different. There's just a lot of context and reasons that are more, I feel like, literal, that make this time the time to ensure that spaces like Youth Justice LA, Garment Workers Center, street vendors of New York City, like these orgs that really aren't one person, but a body of people working to make sure that things happen locally, are amplified. But again, usually the orgs that represent our communities don't have the connections to celebrities that will put them on these type of platforms, right? So then that's what I've been working on, because I feel like there's just like 1, 2, or 3 orgs you can point at that get so much traction and become essentially celebrity organizations. And it's not called that, but if we're being honest, there is a specific PR pull that certain orgs get that makes them the leading face of movement. And then there's also like the fact that centralized narrative ends up happening when you have influencers or people amplifying certain things. People end up wanting to have one face rather than accepting that it's a collective, which I'm sure happened in the civil rights movement, right? You hear of the story of the other woman, I'm not sure her name, before Rosa Parks, that didn't fit the standard according to the PR agency because she was pregnant for the woman that would represent boycotting buses. So I think about that a lot, especially in the time we're in, because there is a lot of pull and control in media. So that's why I'm in media, because I feel like there is a need to disrupt and kind of bring up, as influencers and strategists in digital media, organizations that are doing the work locally, because locally is national, right? Usually bring orgs like, when you think of civil rights, you think of the ACLU, but the fight is really local and it's different in every single state. The populations, the way people experience prisons and ICE, right? Not every state really is exposed to ICE the same way as others. So there's just so much context that I feel like for me, my conclusion is, with every tool I have and being young as hell still, all I'll keep doing is redirecting traction. And that's easy because everyone is on social media, right? So when since people are so obsessively on social media, they end up asking you the question, like even at that post where everybody was like, where are their leaders? And I'm like, well, we have them, right? If we actually acknowledge them, we would see they're spread out all over the country. We want to see one leader, but let's acknowledge who's in your state, who does the work, who did you see get elected that maybe is an immigrant and isn't documented, or that is pushing policy that perhaps would have never been pushed otherwise. So through social media, it's easy to interrupt conversations and redirect people to places and orgs that are doing the work. And I can't speak for everyone, but I know that I'm trying to do that because I haven't seen it.
You did that with me, exactly. And I want to thank you for it because, like I said,
it's cool.
Sometimes people, I know people are afraid to say that they don't know. And I think unless you're, willing to say that you don't know, that there's nothing wrong with saying you don't know, we're not really going to get anywhere. It's just going to be like the same trendy conversation, but you have to be willing to say, you know what, I really don't know. And that's what happened there. I really didn't know, and I had to go back and read up on if you take a look at Miss Sara Mora's bio, you're going to be reading all about all the great work that she's been doing, and she's only 24. I can't even imagine like where you're going to be in the next 5 or 10 years, and everybody else on this panel as well. So so I know that, like I said, you young ladies are out here, and I want everybody to know who you are. Gloria, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah. Can you all hear me? I know I have a 5-year-old.
Oh no, no, it's
So
okay.
Um,
the
I can
background
hear you
is a chat.
perfectly.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
I think I would like to start off by saying like the revolution won't be televised.
Mm,
And what that
Damn.
means is that there are assets to social media. But as I'm hearing like Sara bring up the redirection, right? I think that that's one key element. And also centering the fact that if we do not create foundations or and I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about a foundation for us to be able to organize locally and statewide, and even if it's grassroots or not, then what are we doing? You know, because again, why I say the revolution won't be televised is because we can be out here in the streets. We could be holding our elected officials responsible. We
Mhm.
could be holding the police department accountable. We could be holding the state and the country accountable. But if we aren't connecting with one another and really building in movement, right? When everything else collapses, then what do we have? Because
Mhm.
it is important for folks that are celebrities to, if they can't speak about it, then they redirect, right, what they want to say. But I think that we shouldn't get caught up in making these people the key players in our movements,
right.
because we have key players in our movements right now.
Mhm.
Right before all of this gets sexy, right before everyone wanted to talk about defunding the police and
Mhm.
about social justice and how people are, you know, essentially being murdered by the different entities in different ways, right? Even when we think about the prison industrial complex, right? um, Before all of that, people were still doing the work. And after that, when everyone leaves, like the people that are on this hype because of social media, we're still going to be here. And the work is still going to be moving. Do we need everyone? Yes, we do. We do need everyone. Right. And I think it's about like, how do folks that get a lot of traction on social media again, like redirect, even if it's not claiming something, post a post on organizations that people could tap into. Because even for me in LA, right, LA County is so huge that when we think about geographically, if I don't have a car, right, and I want to go to the YJC space,
Right.
but I'm in East LA or I'm in Montebello or I'm in Silmar. How am I going to get there? You know, so our lens is also limited. And also realizing that social media is also going to, the way that it's set up is that it's going to show certain people what they want to see and what they're used to keeping track of, you know. So it goes, there's more things to that, right? But um I do think that as we're building locally, as we're building here, like that folks that do have different connections should be also building, right? That one responsibility isn't just uh uh redirecting people, but it's also about, hey, if you have capacity, are you putting in the work to linking people together? If you can do that, it's a simple message through DM, you know. And when we're talking about like Latinos, how this conversation started around like the Latinos not, you know, where's our MLK or all these things, I like the first person I thought about was like Unices, right, that started La Defensa, which is an organization that everyone should know about, right? And looking at how this person, this woman really put in so much work into the alternatives to incarceration project that happened here in LA, right? And a lot of folks might not know about that, right? And how we stopped um, the plan. There was a $3.5 billion jail expansion plan, and we stopped that, right? So again, I think that we can't put people on pedestals either. You know, like we have to support the young people and the people in our communities and make sure that they're sustainable and that we're creating essentially like pipelines so that we're all in communication, right? And I think that everyone is needed in this space and in this time too.
Oh, thank you.
Yo, I gotta say, I got chills when you said the revolution will not be televised. Like, that was so powerful. And it's also very true. If you think about the protests that were happening all over the country, the first 3 days, people were talking about it and it was all over the news. And then after that, it was continuing for days and weeks and it was nowhere to be found. Like, I knew about it because I had friends that were actually at protests, or like, you know, somebody posted, oh, this was this protest today, and so I knew about it. But yeah, it was like 3 days that it was televised, and then after that it was not televised anymore.
That's
And
so
I'll
true,
say,
but
like,
I also feel
sorry.
like it's really sad how fast people fundraise that do not have any connections to on the ground organizations, and literally started brand new orgs because of the same gap that local orgs. I almost feel like it's a like a hate that the local orgs have, because I remember when I worked at a local org, like they used my story like crazy, like the local org where I grew up in. And then when I brought up digital media, they're like, oh no, we have to keep it on the ground. And I'm like, people are fundraising ridiculous amounts of money online that are going to brand new orgs, because local orgs that are older have a really big, like, lack of understanding of what digital media could serve for. So even if the revolution will not be televised, people are moving money through media. So it just kind of sucks, because hearing it from somebody that I feel like is part of an org that I love so much, that's exactly why we need to redirect Traction. Traction is not about putting anybody on a pedestal, but actually telling people, like, if you're interested in taking action, it's not just national orgs that do the work, but local orgs like Youth Justice LA should be the ones that people know about, and UNICEF, right? But how do people know about that if there isn't that work that's put into crafting and sharing the story and basically writing history? That's really what I've been like thinking about lately. Like, the stories of local organizers that take action, they're not going to write themselves, because in our community, in Spanish speaking communities, to say it like that, we have the tendency of saying, well, let's not like be pompous, let's not brag about the work we do. But I think it's not about bragging, it's about history being written the way as it's happening. We just work with the American History Museum, and I've just been thinking about that. Like, how do we get local orgs that have done, or local people that have done these things onto these books? Because a lot of them are kind of like, no, I know someone that's done more. And then I'm like, so then who, right? Like, is there someone we can take and write down and put in history and also fundraise for? A lot of people with a lot of traction don't have as much time to connect so many people, but they have time to amplify a local org. But to get and amplify these local orgs, I've approached local orgs and they're like, who do you think you are? And I'm like, yo, I'm literally a mediator and I'm not getting paid for this. Like, this is free work. And it all becomes very complex, because I'm like, social media is not going to go away. It's not going to save anyone. But there are resources that are unfortunately used by people that haven't been in the movement not even 2 days. So they just post a link, it goes viral, and then money goes to a new org that maybe isn't really that damaging.
If I could just say something.
Yeah.
And I agree, right? And so I think that also the media can manipulate narratives and plot people against each other further. And so I think when I'm bringing up around, like, you know, yes, like I said, social media is a tool. We got to have all our tools. You know what I'm saying? Any way that, because again, all the money that, like, you know, like you're saying, there is money that folks can tap into, and a lot of older organizations saying like, well, you know, like, no, let's not do that, and like wanting to keep it at the ground. I don't think that that's true either, right? I do think that it's important to be able to, again, like, tap into resources and create the pipelines so that the folks that do have capacity are able to build. Because, you know, as an organizer, and I've been an organizer for a minute, right? I'm so caught up into my work that I might not have the capacity to reach out to folks on Instagram and connect. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a whole nother level. And again, like, it's also unfair that we get a lot of work placed on us. Like, oh, one thing is you have to do this thing this way. And then, you know, like, even in terms of funders, all these things, right? Like, no, but do it this way. Like, it's like so long, and it's expected from all of us to, and then I believe you, right? And it's like, I know that it's so much is expected. And so that's why I'm like, the more that we're building a community that isn't just reliant on one source, but that can create a holistic approach to how we're coming at this. Because at the end of the day, our communities do need this money. Our communities have been devastated, underfunded for decades, right? So it's about like, how do we build? And I agree with, like, if other people, when you reach out to folks and they're like, oh, well, who do you think you are? And it's like, well, the thing is, like, it's also, when we think about this movement, at least for me, I always think of it. And I think one thing that we have at the YJC is that we try to think of it as a collective, how it's not just one person, right? But we need a group of people, we need a team of people to be able to come together, to not like in every aspect of the work,
Yeah.
right? To cast bills, to do motions, right? To be at BOS, to be at City Hall, to be at in Sacramento, right? To like be in protest and community. It does take a group of people, and it's not just one organization, right? But it's like how do are those organizations also collaborating? So I think
Well, I
collaborate.
also think the big thing that Sara said that I think is really important is like older orgs want to keep it this way. And like the new orgs are doing this stuff. And I think that that's something that's so Latino in the like the old school mentality. Like, no, it has to stay this, it has to stay that tradition and tradition. But it's like, yo, it's 2020. Like, we have to keep growing with the times or else you get left behind. You know, specifically the term Latinx. People are like, don't mess up my Spanish or don't mess up my language. But it's like, it has nothing to do with that. It's about gender neutral language. And the fact that there are non-binary people that want to feel represented and be able to be connected to their brownness. And that's where Latinx comes from. And Latin is another term, you know? And so I think that's something that's so like frustrating as a Latina dealing with Latinos and Latinx people, like, no, this is the way and this is the only way. So either you do it this way or you're not part of us. And it's like, no, wait a second. Like,
and I feel like
learn.
That's what makes introducing certain things so intimidating. Cause like I've been doing free work for the past 6 years around digital media because already I'm pitching something that doesn't really exist at local org level. Right. And then I remember this one time I went to the border. I was working to give out free workshops digital free workshops at the border, and I met with the Chicano committee, and literally one of the guys, like so condescending, he was just like, who do you think you are to come here and tell us you're going to give us digital free workshops? Like, we've made it work without it. And I was like, yo, nobody said, like, you know what I mean? If I would have approached him in an aggressive way, I would have understood that. But I'm so soft when I speak about introducing things like this, particularly because I know it's scary, that I was like, yo, I'm not getting paid for this. Like, this is not something that I'm not selling a book. I don't have an org. Like, the space I have is not even a C3 or a C4. I've kept it like just a space. Like, it's like literally just an online community. And just seeing how mad he was, and the fact that like I was staying at an old lady's house, was really trying to put in free work, because you see how narrative gets screwed because the people with the money to do the narrative don't waste any time, right? They put the money in, they shift the narrative, and even just trying to introduce free services that around digital media, you see the gap in wanting to introduce tools to the community that are not the whole thing, right? It doesn't exist individually. I always talk about that online, but it does exist now, and it's not going to go away. And it doesn't mean we have to depend on it, because I talk about it online. I'm like, can't replace the work. It just doesn't. Like, logistically, think about it. It's just another tool. It's like flyers, but now online. And it's scary for me because I'm like, I'm 24. I didn't finish my bachelor's because I felt like organizing was what made the most sense for me and just like the community I was a part of. But I'm like, it's taking me forever to really get even accepted as a free service. And I'm like, I'm broke all the time. Like, I have a big platform, but I'm really trying to introduce to the community that history is going to start to be written online. And everybody in the community is somebody else is better. And that's beautiful. But then it turns into, we have a hard time introducing resources because everybody's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, nothing, because you would have seen it somewhere, right? I don't know. It's a little crazy. I feel like my mental health has been triggered as hell, especially through quarantine trying to help. I fundraised $30K. I'm like, maybe this will be enough proof. Like, you know,
Latinos are so judgy. We're so judgy on every aspect of just being brown. And I think that's part of it too, where it's like, oh, well, you're only doing that, so we're not going to respect you. Or like, oh, well, you're Afro-Latino, so you're not really this. And it's like, yo, we are all brown. Like, we are all brown, period. Let's just accept each other and unite, because that's also a thing. Like, it's a separation from this org to that org. Well, we're doing this and you're doing that. And like, so even though you guys are both trying to do better for our people, it's like, oh no, you're over there and I'm over here. And like, well, what org are you going to work with? That one? Well, if you're not going to work with us, then you're going to work over there. And you know what I mean? Like, and we just got to like unity, people. Unity.
It's hard. It's hard.
It's so hard. It's so hard.
No,
for sure. It's also ageist though. It's also ageism, right? Like, let's keep it 100. It's ageism. If you were an older woman that can say like, I have been doing this for 40 years and have worked with A through Z, the level of trust and everything would be different. And so I think and this is not just in the Latino community. I think it's just in general, even in the movement,
Right.
right? The movement is beautiful. The movement also has its flaws, right? Like the movement is also human. So I think recognizing that the it what needs to shift is the comprehension around like tools and the way that folks relay. Like for example, you if you're having a hard time making these, doing these things, and you're doing it for free, right? And again, like, you don't even have to do it for free. People
Right.
charge so much money for this shit.
I'll
We
be
talk
so
about
confused,
hiring
like,
consultants. Yeah. So
bro.
I think it's more about like how is it that the framing shift is too. Because I
Mm,
could see why folks are upset with like someone that's also a young person saying like, well, no, everything's gonna be digitized. And no, like, so it's
mm,
like, well, but folks don't come from that. So it's also
right.
about like how is, and again, it's a lot of work. So even the
Mm-hmm.
fact of even thinking this
Girl.
through, so but just appreciate you and the work that you do.
And just a
Yeah.
question for anybody who wants to tackle this: are there any organizations or any other Latinx leaders that any of you ladies look up to, or that is an example of somebody who is kind of doing the work where they are working together, where it's not like a fight between the young and an old, or somebody that would be a good example who is doing this besides yourselves, of course.
Hmm.
I mean, I think, oh, go ahead. I mean, at first I thought about like, I love this question. And then I also understand that this is like a Latinx leads thing, conversation or topic. But I also want to bring in like, it's about centering, right? Like Chelsea said, like the black and brown and like different culture unity. And I think one thing that comes up, and I noticed in the
Mm,
Andres Guardado um, super unfortunate killing, is that it was like, oh, well, cool. Now, I mean, first of all, Andres Guardado was Central American, was not Mexican.
right. He's
And
not.
a lot of
Right.
folks came at that, oh, cool, the brown person. First of all, no one should be killed by the hands of law enforcement.
Right.
It does not matter what race you are. That should never be, that's not okay. One. And then two, it's like we should be supporting the as Latinos, as a Latina, right? We should all be supporting the different organizations that are doing this work. And it should not be focused on one person. And I think the even around like care not cages and folks wanting to do a lot of these protests on the kids that are in cages, right? Or the kids that um the babies and undocumented stuff. I think that everything intertwines, and it does take a moment to breathe and remember like, I am not in the struggle because of me, but because I need for everyone
Hmm.
to be liberated. I need everyone to have access to healthcare and education and homes. B,
Right.
right, and to have access to resources. And so for me, I think like, yes, I understand this question around like what specific Latino orgs, but like as someone that has a lot of my work was based in South Central or LA, um, and I'm not familiar with like East LA folks, right? Like in East LA, I would feel very different, and I'm also a Latina, right? But my lingo is very different because I grew up with people, black people, African American people, however you want to call them, right? But I grew up with different people, so even for me, I'm not accustomed to an organization leading just for Latinos, right? Like
Mhm.
that was never the spaces that I grew up in. But I feel like it's always been about coexisting. And even the orgs like La Defensa or Stop LAPD Spying, right? Or Brotherhood Crusade or Brothers Themselves Coalition, right? Like we work in South Central, and these there's just a few organizations, right? But it's not just based on like black leadership, right? It's like, Latino people or other people of color can also come in. Like I also work for another coalition called the Los Angeles Youth Uprising Coalition, right? Where it's made up of 5 different coalitions, right? Where even the thought of like, and again, I'm the coordinator of this coalition for the young people as well. And so I've never been like Latinos this, and like, what I'm saying, like those divides or those barriers. um and even in terms of funding and where who might view this podcast or not, right? And people might be hella mad at what I'm saying, but I also think like it's important to recognize that if we keep dividing ourselves, the win will only be so much, right? That if we keep creating divisions, even on this platform or any other platform,
Mm-hmm.
we won't be able to win, right? And even in terms of people being undocumented, and my parents are currently both undocumented. Um, Latino people are not the only people that are undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and that's
And
why
that's a big lie.
when I was talking about the Black Lives Matter protests and stuff on social media, Latinos were coming at me like, oh, what about the kids in the cages? Or what about this? And why are you talking about Black Lives Matter? What about us? And I'm like, yo, I never said Latinos don't matter or the kids in the cages don't matter. And I'm like, when they first got in the cages, I was at a protest. We had a march. We had the One Vida at a Time campaign. And there was Black people that were there. So don't try to come at me for supporting this movement when this movement helps us in general because we deal with police brutality too. And again, it doesn't have to be a them or us. It's just like, again, immigrants are not just brown. You know what I mean? Like, and like she said, immigrants aren't just brown. There's immigrants in all walks of the world that come here. You know what I mean? Like, and we just, it's again, like she said, we're unity, damn it. Shit. Sorry. I'm like, I don't even know what to say anymore. Like,
But before
No,
before we close out on this panel, what I would like to know is if all of you can share a little bit about what any projects that you're currently working on and how we as individuals can contribute, can help. How can we help to amplify the voices? How can we help to donate money? Like, what is it that is currently on your desk that we can help, and how can we help? We could
oh,
start.
before that, I did want to
Go ahead, Chelsea.
talk about the National Immigrant Youth Alliance because when I worked on this documentary film, The Infiltrators, I learned about the National Immigrant Youth Alliance.
Great
And
movie, by
like,
the way.
it was, oh, thank you. Yeah, it's so powerful and it's so like crazy. But, it was amazing to see, again, young people of color fighting for not only themselves, but for other people that didn't feel that they could fight. And again, you had Mohammed, you had Vidi, who I played, and Marco, and they were heroes. And I know it was really beautiful. And I know they've gone on and they've done other stuff and they're working with other orgs and stuff. But like for me, learning about them and that story and how they infiltrated that detention center and literally put themselves at risk to be deported was just really beautiful. And again, I had to learn about it because of a film, and I wish we have to have some way to kind of just get more information out there. But just because you had mentioned earlier, like, oh, who's someone that you look up to? And like, I honestly look up to Viridiana. Like, she's just, oh my God, I love that woman.
Sara or
yeah,
Gloria? Just wanted to know
yeah,
if there's anything you guys are working on that how can we help?
yeah. Thank you. And I think like one of the things, sorry, even just going back to the last conversation is like, yes, we should have spaces where we learn about our indigenousness and tap in with the roots of our culture and also like unlearn a lot of the misogyny or patriarchy or just like hurtful things that being colonized and gentrification has done to us. So it's like, it's okay to have these spaces, but that are for like Latinos and for Black people and for Asian people and like white whatever. But I think like one of the things is how do we learn to remember that we're all in this shit together, I'm a brown woman. I can only speak for like myself and uh, for the people I've worked with, the other Black people I've worked with, and I think it's recognizing how like uh, the people that are most oppressed, once they are free, once they are well, then we will get well. And we've always been able to work together in different ways, right? So um, I know that it's a lot that's going on social media right now, or that happened. And so I'm like for less like for lack of better words, but it's like how do we not hate on each other? How do we uplift each other? And support each other in different times because we will have different times and different needs. And then I'll say like the what was your last question?
Oh no, I was just saying, are there any current projects that you're working on, maybe with Youth Coalition, where people can help?
Just
Whether it's donating money, whether it's an actionable item. Like, how can a common person, reach out to you and, help
Yeah,
with any of these initiatives?
I think that right now at the Youth Justice Coalition, you can follow us on Instagram, Youth Justice LA, and I believe it's Youth Justice LA for the other platforms too. But so some of the current work right now that's going on is around like moving young people in LA County completely out of probation. So that's like one piece of the work, and then there's also like for the first time ever the probation reform and implementation team, right? Where that space is really meant for these group of people to be able to hold probation accountable, right? So when these meetings do come up, and this is in LA again, folks could tap in, right? And then if folks want to volunteer, I know we're in COVID and a pandemic and stuff too, so figuring out how that would work. But if folks want to volunteer, we do have a membership inside that's locked up, and so we do send them letters in terms of when they are looking for reentry resources, or bills that have passed that can support their that can help them get out, or people that are looking for resources when they parole, right? Like um, there's like that line of work. We have like a legal clinic, so those, if people would want to volunteer and do that sort of work or learn to do that work, because we also do court support and other stuff, that would be much needed, really. And again, like my email, I don't know if my email is probably there, but my email is gloria at youth for the number 4 justice.org.
And we can list it like at the end of the conversation. We'll list everybody's websites, and we can list your website
Yeah,
too, Gloria.
that's my email, my personal email. But yes, for sure the website. But if folks want to connect on how they can support, that too, and we can also redirect folks, or I could take that on, and whatever folks are interested in, and wherever area of the work folks want to be in.
Thank you, Gloria. How about you, Sarah? I know you got a lot on your plate right now.
Yeah. Well, people could follow me on Instagram at Miss Sara Mora. And through the population mic, I'm going to be launching a scholarship, which I haven't talked about on Instagram at all. This is the first place I'm mentioning it in. And it's going to be for the same thing I just talked about pretty much the whole time, giving out free money for students, young people who want to help orgs doing the work like Youth Justice LA. And through the population mic, I'm going to be permanently doing 72-hour campaigns, amplifying orgs all across the country for the same purpose of redirecting traction. So when people click my platform, they'll be redirected to about 25 orgs spread across the country. So that's population mic on Instagram. They could donate to the links that I share.
Great. Chelsea, do you have anything that you want to share?
Right now, the way that I can do it is when it comes to Hollywood and representation. So right now I'm in the process of developing a show with my best friend Noemi Gonzalez to have 2 Latina leads that is just badass, right? And then also I'm producing a romantic comedy that I would be the lead female and the male lead would be Black. So again, it's showing like that unity, which I feel like is really important. So on that aspect, that's what I'm doing right now currently. I'm trying to stay very active when it's coming to like this election, because my mother was not political at all. So I've had to learn about politics in the last 4 years and learn to like pay attention and do this and kind of do some research. So like this is the first time I've ever watched debates. And it's been really eye-opening for me. And so that's why I'm, I'm not somebody that is very knowledgeable. I don't know everything and all the like points when it comes to politics. The way I see it is a vote against Trump is a vote against racism. And that's how I talk about it. And again, we're never going to have a perfect president. Obama wasn't a perfect president. But again, it's just to get better. We need to grow from here, and we're in a really bad place. And for me personally, I think Biden and Harris is that way. So I talk about it. But I'm also very vocal on social media and say, I don't know all the details. I don't know all the ins and outs of it. From what I see, this is what I'm doing and this is how I feel. So I'm going to talk about it, and I'm open to have conversations with people.
And since you did mention voting, and I know we're like less than 3 weeks away from the election, Sarah, on your Instagram a couple of days ago, I know that you mentioned that, yes, we all agree it's important to vote, but we have to realize that, voting is not everything. There's all of this other work that needs to be done, like in between. So, I do want to remind folks that, yes, if you are eligible to vote, vote. If you have the privilege of voting, vote. But a reminder that, there's other elections, there's other issues, there's a lot of other work that can be done, in addition to voting. Of course, we want you to vote, but don't forget that it's not just about voting.
And then also that it's not just voting just about the president every 4 years. It's the smaller elections on the smaller things that really make a difference.
Well, that's why Sarah, I think I commented on that, because orgs are doing that work, right? So I think as people with platforms, we have the duty to redirect people to the community orgs that are doing local election mobilizing. And then just because I'm in a world where activism is really wow, I forgot her name. She brought it up before. It's like really sexy to talk about elections, but what about all year around, where communities have to advocate and are in like really lengthy work that is not Instagrammable. Just making sure people taking action doesn't start and end at voting.
What voting? Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I definitely was honored to have all of you three young Latinx leaders here on our panel today. And again, just want to remind folks out to, if you do have the privilege and are eligible to vote, do not forget to go out and vote on November 3rd. Thank you, ladies. Bye.
Thank you.